Welcome to Chaos, Chaos55t here, and I'm back from my vacation week. Oh boy, I'm covered in sunburns and my voice is slightly out to where I can't do any high-pitched character voices. But that's not the story I'm about to tell. This one talks about a toxic relative I had to deal with. For the longest time, I always thought that they were a nice person. That until they started exposing themselves by showing me this article that explains about narcissistic personality disorder, but they reworded it to make it sound like someone else had it. And I'll get to that one after I explain the whole situation. I'll call this relative Richard. I had to deal with Richard for almost about my entire life. Now, I tried my best to organize the worst that they have ever done, so many apologies. Now, the first one I can remember pretty easily. Me and my sister decided to go into a pool. Of course, this was after a feud between me and her, so we weren't the best of friends. Probably still not, but still. I decided to kick my sister just so I can get away from her. Richard, however, stepped in and kicked me out of the pool, telling me that I was, well, not allowed to come back in until they finish. Yes, I deserved that punishment because, of course, I kicked my sister, for God's sakes. But here's where things get really fucked up, the first thing that I figured out. As we all got into the changing room, Richard decided to say this.
Why would you bite your sister's nipple? That is not okay.
I was confused because I saw and heard my sister tell Richard that I kicked her, not bite her nipple. Now, I tried to explain that that was just a misunderstanding and that I only kicked her, not bite her. Instead, Richard kept to his story and then goes,
When you get back, I'm gonna make sure that you get grounded.
That really angered me at the time, so of course the next thing I did was I called them a bitch. And the next thing I knew, Richard gave me the backhand. They slapped me so hard I fell back onto the lockers. Now let me tell you, at the time, I was a minor. I wasn't even a teenager by that point. I was probably 11 when it happened. And that person, Richard, was an adult. Now, to adults who want to learn how to discipline a child, you do not use the backhand. Use your palm. And do not hit hard enough to knock over the child because, of course, that can not only mentally scar them, but that could also cause some actual physical damage. But for Richard, a family decided to praise his actions. You want to know why? It was because he used the sister biting nipple story to convince them that I deserved getting the backhand. And for the longest time, I actually believed it. I thought I actually did deserve the backhand. I thought I deserved the belt. I thought I deserved all the punishment that they gave me because I trusted them. They were an adult. I wasn't. Now, this also happened around my childhood, and it still is happening today. Richard no likey when people are upsetty. Not like an empathy thing, just more of like, they get easily annoyed and will say this.
There are people around this world that are much more miserable than you. Get over it. There is no need to cry. There are people who suffer a lot more than you do.
And my favorite.
You think you had it worse? Well.
Then goes on to a story spree just to make you feel bad for getting upset. But Richard also doesn't like it when people are positive. They tend to act negative, or otherwise known as a negative Nancy. The reason why Richard does this? It's because they want a reaction. It's just like trolling, except instead of wanting to fuck with people for jokes, they want to fuck with people to control them like puppets. Take, for example, that you're talking with your friend. Richard will come up and say some humiliating things that he knows about you in front of your friend. If you don't give Richard a reaction, they'll continue until they get the reaction that they want. If you give them a reaction on the fly, they'll get the satisfaction they want. Sometimes they'll even continue by getting into a full-blown argument with you. Here's something else that Richard does that is pretty similar to what I just said. Richard likes to one-up people. Maybe it's unintentional, or maybe that it is intentional. Who knows? You can't get into the mind of a narc that easily. But I will say this as an example. Maybe you lost a close pet of yours. Richard will come in and one-up the ever-living shit out of you, even bringing up stories that has nothing to do with a dead pet.
You think you had it worse? I had to get 10 back surgeries because I got abused by someone who kills pets for a living.
A lot of the time, Richard just lies and over-exaggerates any story he makes just to, well, one-up you. They even one-up my fucking boyfriend when he was having a hard time with his parents. I'm just gonna say right now that I'm just gonna end it right here because there's so much I'm going to cover later in different parts, and I've barely scratched the surface of the behavior of Richard. Now tell us your story. Have you ever dealt with someone with narcissistic personality disorder? And if so, you can explain us the story or just say that you've dealt with one, because we're not pressuring you to tell us the full story. This is Chaos55t, signing out.